The Titans offensive line. Titans fans have been waiting years just to field a competent group at this position. Is it finally the year? Can J.C. Latham take an all-pro step? Why Dan Moore isn't quite as bad as everyone said he was when the Titans signed him? We're going to go through all 16 offensive linemen on this roster and decide who makes it and who gets cut. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville. In partnership with 440 Sports, I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. Justin, I'm back on the right side of the screen. You're on the left side of the screen. People were freaking out about it. I flipped us around, and people didn't like it, so we're back to how it's always been.
We had like 5 people at least comment, why did you guys switch sides? It was like, they thought it was like a government conspiracy. Like there was a lot that went into the thought process of why we switched sides. Is it like Face Off, like Nick Cage and John Travolta? Like what happened to the Music City? This used to be a real podcast.
Well, we're back now, so everyone can settle down. The panic can subside. And today, Justin, we are continuing our series. We started last week. We went through 5 position groups last week. We got 5 more to go through this week. And today, we are previewing the offensive line unit ahead of Titans training camp, which is just over a week away. Players report next Tuesday, so not Tuesday this week, but Tuesday next week. We're closing in on training camp, and so we have 5 more positions to get through. Offensive line today. Brief overview of the position is where we're going to start. 16 players, the largest group of any position on the roster. We got a lot of guys to get through, and we're going to try to not be too long because honestly, like, Brendan James, Sam Mustipher, Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, like, are we gonna say their name again this entire season, between now and February? Probably not. Maybe if somebody gets hurt.
When they cut a couple of them in August, we'll talk about it.
That's fair. We will mention it when they get cut. But so we're not going to spend too much time on the depth, but I will say it. You and I have 8 guys that are locks to make the roster. Those 8 guys are the starting 5, obviously.
On this. Full agreement.
Yeah. Full agreement. This is, I think, cut and dry in our mind, and we'll see, obviously, what happens. But the five starters are obvious. Dan Moore, Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, Kevin Zeitler, J.C. Latham. That's from left to right along the offensive line. Blake Hance, we're pegging as the swing tackle. Corey Levin, we're pegging as the swing interior guy. And Jackson Slater, drafted this year, will definitely make the roster. That's 8. Now, the Titans could elect to keep 9. They could elect to keep 10. We'll get to that at the end of this episode when we do our roster projection and why we think the number will be 9. But then there's 8 other guys competing for that last 1 or 2 spots. Sam Mustipher, Chandler Brewer, Brendan James, Andrew Rupsich, Jalen Duncan, John Ojukwu, Oli Udo, and Brandon Crenshaw Dixon. It's a huge group. We're going to talk through all of them, but let's start with the starters because I think this is the big question of this unit is, can the Titans offensive line just be average? Just be league average. We're not asking for top 5, top 10 tackle play. We're not asking for top 5 offensive line play across the board. We just don't want to see this team field the worst pair of tackles for the 4th consecutive season. Justin, Can this group be okay?
Yes, I believe that it can. It's funny. You tend to go in with high expectations. We've been hurt, I think, so many times by this unit that we're probably going in with maybe even lower expectations than we should have. Like, I, for the most part, really like the overall makeup of this group. The biggest question mark that I have is at center with Lloyd Cushenberry. Yeah. And there are some other questions I'll pose, but the one that actually concerns me is Lloyd Cushenberry coming off a season-ending Achilles injury. It's usually it's sometimes a kiss of death, depending on which position you play. Not always the case for an offensive lineman, maybe a bit more serious for a running back because you lose that ability to run the football with explosion and burst. The concern for an offensive lineman, and Lloyd has touched on it, and the Titans touched on it throughout the offseason, is the ability to anchor. That's obviously really important, right? You're kind of relying on that lower body strength to kind of carry you through that anchor. And if you're dealing with a damaged Achilles, it's hard to do that at the level that you need to do it in the NFL. So that's the big question with Lloyd Cushenberry. I'll be honest with you, I don't have a ton of other concerns. Like, we're going to have the Dan Moore conversation. I feel really good and confident about what Dan Moore is or who he is. The Kevin Zeitler thing, you could wonder at 35, Titans, remember when they brought in Steve Hutchinson and he was not good? towards the back end of his career. Like, there's always a chance that something like that happens when you're 35. I feel pretty good about Kevin's. He was phenomenal last year at 34. So, yeah, change of scenery, new O-line coach, new teammates, not as good of a team, right? The lines are obviously rolling, but I feel pretty good about Kevin Zeitler. And then I'd be honest with you, like maybe I should, but I don't really have a lot of questions about Peter Skoronski or JC Latham. I feel so good about who they are as players and who they're going to be this year. Maybe more so Latham than Skoronski, but I've got an extreme amount of confidence in those two guys. So I think we're going in with slightly lower expectations. Look, the Titans last year probably had the 29th or 30th best offensive, the second or third worst, essentially, offensive line in the NFL. This year, if they're 20th best, that would be a slight disappointment, in my opinion, but would still be considerably better than what they were last year, right? Like the 20th best offensive line is a lot better than the 30th best offensive line in the national. It really is. It's a monumental difference. That's a difference between, we're not being hamstrung by our O-line. They're giving us a chance to execute on every play. Maybe they're not making a world of it. Maybe they're not the reason that we're creating explosives, but they're giving us a chance to create explosives, and they're not preventing us from creating explosives, right? Whereas the 30th best offensive line in the league is like, we can't do anything. It's what you saw last year. We can't drop back. We can't run.
It impacts every play call when your offensive line is that bad, because you can't call a 7-step drop. You can't call a deep developing route with any confidence that the ball's going to leave the quarterback's hands. So it's huge.
And my realistic expectation, I want to throw it back to you, is that this is like the 17th best offensive line in the league. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, top 10, you're probably pushing it a little bit. There's some, the Lions, the Bills, there's some great, the Eagles, some phenomenal, the Eagles went through some changes, but some phenomenal offensive lines around the NFL. I think the Jets are going to be really good. That's random, but I think the Jets will be really good this year. But the Titans, if they're 17th, 18th, I mean, what an improvement that is from last season.
And honestly, quarterback play is going to have a lot to do with it too, because when we look at just like raw numbers and sacks allowed and things like that, there was a stat posted on Friday of last week from Fantasy Points data, just the pressure to sack ratios, basically the best pressure to sack ratios for quarterbacks in the league. And it's like Josh Allen, 8% of the times he was pressured turned into a sack. Jordan Love, 9.7% of the times he was pressured turned into a sack. Will Levis, this is since 2021. This isn't just last season. This is the last 4 seasons. Will Levis was last among all quarterbacks in that span in pressure to sack ratio his season last year, with a 32.3% pressure to sack rate. That means a third of the times that he faced pressure, he did not escape it. He did not get the ball out. He did not get out of pressure. He was sacked a third of the times. If you're giving up a sack every third pressure, then your offense is completely hamstrung. So quarterback play is going to have a lot to do with at least what the final numbers look like here. But I do kind of want to talk through at least the starters sort of one by one and what we're expecting from them this year, and then we'll go quicker through the backups. And there are a ton of reasons to be optimistic about this offensive line and a few players that make me very optimistic. But there are also some reasons for concern, and so I kind of want to get the concerning ones out of the way first. And you started in on the Lloyd Cushenberry concerns, and I want to go through that because this to me, like, after what we've been through the last few years, just as fans and as people covering the team, like my mind now, as you were kind of saying, defaults to what could go wrong with this line versus what could go right if they all gel and it comes together. So what could go wrong, first and foremost, as you started to talk about there, was Lloyd Cushenberry cannot get back on the field. Like, he's just not ready. He goes out there for practice, for some padded practices, and he's like, I'm not trusting my Achilles yet. Achilles is one of the hardest injuries to come back from in all of sports, and it's one of the few. Obviously, medical advancements have made it easier to come back from than it was 10 years ago, but it's still one of the hardest, and especially
when 300 pounds,
especially when you have that much weight that you have to carry on that position, and then you're not just 300 pounds of yourself. Then there's 300 pounds across the line from you that you're trying to keep from getting to your quarterback and stop them from doing their one objective, or to move in the run game, and like just that drive and that leverage and that power. It's going to be tough for Lloyd Cushenberry to be himself, I think, at any point this season, but especially week 1. And so I think the question is, how much of himself are you getting? Are you getting 80% Lloyd Cushenberry? Are you only getting 50% Lloyd Cushenberry? And then where does that turn into, you're just not up to your standard, so we can't even play you at all? And then you look at how he played last season. You need him to be better than he played last season if you want this line to take the step you want.
That's the quiet part out loud. Because he got hurt, a lot of people sort of excused him a little bit, but to start the year, it wasn't great. It was just kind of okay.
And he only played 499 snaps, so didn't even get to 500 snaps. His PFF grades were not good. 55.4 overall offense grade, 57.2 pass blocking grade. Like, that isn't good enough for what they're paying him to be and what they need the offensive line to be. So my concerns with Cushenberry are twofold. One, can he get back to himself, and how quickly does that process happen? And two, can he play at a higher level than he played last year? And you would hope that, another year in Bill Callahan's tutelage and system, next to offensive linemen that are supposedly upgraded. Kevin Zeitler is a Pro Bowl level player playing next to him. It's a lot better than what he had in Dylan Radins last year. But that's my biggest concern, and you kind of voiced it already. So I wanted to get that out of the way. Like, that is the thing, I think, more than anything else that could derail this offensive line, is you're just giving up a constant stream of interior pressure because the center play is not good enough.
Yeah, that's the number one thing to monitor for me across this unit at training camp. What's his status when they report in mid-July? Probably going to be a little early for him to be full go, but how close is he? What's he doing? And what's the timeline to getting him back, in padded practices and things of that nature?
So Corey Levin would be the guy who steps in to replace him, and we'll talk about Corey Levin in a second when we get through the starters. But my other big concern is, I think every Titans fan's concern, it's Dan Moore and the massive contract that he signed to, because the Titans had no choice. They were in a bind. This is the only place where they went out and spent a ton of money in free agency. It's the only non-value signing that they made. And it's because the quality of tackles on the free agent market simply aren't good enough. And NFL teams, especially the Titans and what they've been the last few years, are desperate for improved offensive line pay. So they have to overpay if they want to go get the top of the market guy. And the top of the market guy gave up 12 sacks last year, which was the most in the NFL. But, Justin, I have some stats here that I think are going to illustrate why, although Dan Moore Jr. is not necessarily a good tackle, I would say he's probably your average level starter, he's a massive upgrade over what they've fielded the last few years. And this goes back to your thing about going from 30 to 20 is huge. So I actually put a table together with some stats, and before I get into the table, I should mention, shout out to Easton Freeze, because he wrote an article a few days ago or last week sometime, why Titans fans shouldn't cower from high expectations for Cam Ward's revamped offensive line despite tragic recent history. So he threw out this comparison, the idea of comparing Dan Moore Jr. to the past three tackles who were playing in Tennessee. And so I kind of stole this idea from Easton, but I went a little deeper with the stat comparison here. So if you see here, we have Dan Moore, and we got the total snaps played. And this is a big deal. And this is a big deal for two reasons. Number one, consistency and health are super important. And being dependable, Dan Moore's only missed 2 games in a 4-year career in the NFL. So that snap number is big for that reason. But it's also big because when you look at things like sacks allowed and pressures allowed compared to how many snaps these guys actually played, well, now it's a whole different ballgame. So Dan Moore last season, 1,128 snaps. That was that ranked 41 in terms of offensive linemen snaps played, not among tackles, among all offensive linemen. His PFF grades, 67.2 overall offense grade, 66.9 pass blocking grade. Again, these ranks are not just among tackles, these are among all offensive linemen, 79th and 91st. And that doesn't sound great until you start comparing it to what the Titans were fielding before that. Sacks allowed 12, pressures allowed 41. But when you're allowing 12 sacks on 627 pass blocking snaps, that's different than when, Andre Dillard is allowing 12 sacks on 331 pass blocking snaps. So I have sack rate allowed in here. That's the number of sacks allowed per dropback, right? So 1.9% sack rate allowed is better than anything the Titans fielded the previous 3 years. Nicholas Petit-Frere last year only played 621 snaps. Andre Dillard the year before that only played 562. And Dennis Daly the year before that did play 942, which sounds like a lot, but that's still ranked only 102nd among all offensive linemen in snaps played. So it's not actually that many snaps. And then you look at their PFF grades, and it is just a disaster. Nicholas Petit-Frere, overall grade, 193rd out of 204 players. The year before that, Andre Dillard, overall grade, 51.0 overall PFF grade, 170th out of 205 players in 2023. And the year before that, Dennis Daly, PFF grade overall 46.1. That ranked 195th out of 212 players. So yeah, 79th best overall offense grade for Dan Moore. Doesn't sound that good. But when the guys before him were ranking 193, 170, 195, and still giving up 10 sacks, 12 sacks, 12 sacks on way fewer pass blocking snaps, it is a massive upgrade. So the sack rate allowed for these other guys, 2.7% for Petit Frere last year, 3.6% for Andre Dillard the year before that, 2.4% for Daly the year before that, compared to the 1.9% Dan Moore gave up in what was his worst year of his career in terms of sacks allowed, blocking for guys like Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who notoriously hold on to the ball too long, and therefore you're going to give up more sacks. I'm not that concerned. I got one more table here. This one is Dan Moore's career averages against the averages for the three guys that I just went through over their time in Tennessee. So average snaps played per season, Dan Moore, 1113. Compare that to 708. So on average, he's playing 400 more snaps in a season. That dependability gives you continuity on the offensive line, which is one of the most important things, that you're not swapping guys in and out of the lineup. Dan Moore should be a pretty reliable player there. You look at the average PFF grades. Dan Moore over his career has a 60.3 overall offense grade. The three guys I just mentioned in those 3 seasons, the average amongst them was 47.8. So again, 60.3, it's not that high, but it's way better than 47.8. And then you look at the average sacks allowed, average pressures allowed. Dan Moore averaged 8.5 sacks given up per season and 46 pressures allowed per season. Well, compare that to 11.3 sacks allowed from the other three guys to 44.7 pressures allowed. Now, it is a slightly fewer pressures allowed, but again, we're talking about an average of 661 pass blocking snaps versus an average of 404. So over 200 more pass blocking snaps.
Huge difference.
And then Dan Moore's career sack rate allowed is way lower than last season's 1.9%. It's only 1.28%. And the three guys before in the 3 seasons before that for the Titans averaged more than double that, 2.8% sack rate. So you think Dan Moore's not that big of an upgrade? You think he was an overpay? Maybe he was an overpay, but you don't get him unless you overpay. And he is going to be a massive upgrade. This is also a guy who's only 26 years old, turns 27 in September. He's going to be playing for Bill Callahan. He's still an ascending player, and now he gets to come learn under one of the greatest O-line coaches in the NFL history of the NFL. I think he could be poised for his best season of his career, and even if he has his worst season of his career, which was last year, it's still miles ahead of where the Titans tackles were in the 3 years before that.
Yeah, the number that strikes me the most on that table that you just pointed out is Andre Dillard and Nicholas Petit-Frere, 41 pressures allowed, 2023-2024, right, apiece. 41 pressures, the same number as Dan Moore, and essentially half the amount of pass blocking snaps. Like,
right.
I mean, double it essentially, right? You look at that and you don't think there's a huge difference. Well, they would have allowed 80 pressures versus Dan Moore's 40, right? Like if they had played the same sample size, give or take, right? And then ESPN, Seth Walder, always phenomenal Seth Walder. He just put out a great article grading every team's offseason. I love the ESPN analytics, stats and research, all that. They had Dan Moore at a 93% pass block win rate this past season. Seth Walder says in the article, he was so much better this past year, 11th best at offensive tackle. So huge discrepancy between what PFF sort of assigned Dan Moore in terms of sacks and pressures allowed versus what ESPN stats and info did. 93% pass block win rate, the 11th best tackle in the NFL. Did the Titans overpay for him? Yes, as you said. To me, though, like when this signing happened, there was way too many Titans fans that blew this out of proportion. I think the Titans knew exactly what they were doing, and there's nothing wrong with it. They were willing to throw money at a problem that's been so big, that's been so grand for 3 running seasons in a row. They were willing to throw money at it to make it average. There is nothing wrong with that, okay? They whiffed on drafting 3 guys to fix this position with 3 top 70 picks. You forgot about Isaiah Wilson? I'm not letting Dylan Radins off the hook. They thought he was going to play tackle. They kicked him to guard because he sucked at tackle. And obviously NPF. The 2 of those guys were essentially top 50 picks. One of them was a top 30 first rounder, and the other one was a top 75. They couldn't solve this problem. And yes, it was different GMs. I get that, but they were have a hard time solving it this year. You're taking a quarterback at number 1 and you're not moving off it. Dan Moore was the best tackle in free agency, especially one that signed elsewhere. Like, there was some talk about Ronnie Stanley. Well, he stayed in Baltimore. They always stay where they are, typically. Alaric Jackson stayed with the Rams. Dan Moore was top of the market. They paid top of the market money because someone else would have. I love these overreactions. Like, I can't believe they paid him that. Like, people act like that he was NPF. This is NPF 2.0. And he got $80 million in free agency. NPF just got cut from the San Francisco 49ers 90-man roster. After OTAs, they watched him for 3 practices in OTAs and cut no pads, and they still cut him. They're like, this guy's a waste of time in San Francisco. And they signed Andre Dillard, by the way, and they've kept him. They got rid of NPF before Andre. Like, don't compare the two. I don't care what the pressures and sacks say. One of them got $80 million in free agency and would have gotten that elsewhere. You think Tennessee's stupid? You don't think everyone knows what a guy's going to get if you don't give it to him? You think Dan Moore was going to get $40 million instead of 80 if it wasn't the Titans? No, it was going to be in that same ballpark. The other guy that started for them last year is at home. We're in the summer of 90-man rosters. He can't even get on a 90. So it's like, give me a break. This is a huge upgrade. I don't care that they overpaid. Sometimes I order Uber Eats. You want to throw money at a problem to get rid of it. I didn't want to leave the house. I ordered takeout, right? Like, Dan Moore is going to take care of this problem for them. He's going to be so much better than what they've had over the past 3 seasons.
And he might end up being the worst. If Lloyd Cushenberry does bounce back okay, Dan Moore might end up being their worst starter on the offensive line. And that's okay. If your worst starter is league average, again, leaps and miles and bounds ahead.
He won't be. I agree with you. Not a big deal, and I don't want to blow smoke. I'm more worried about center than I am about Dan Moore.
Yeah. I mean, he's probably your worst non-center offensive lineman. I mean, if everything goes according to plan, he better be your worst. Otherwise, somebody's playing terrible, or Dan Moore just all of a sudden turns into the best tackle in football. I don't expect. I think that's very unlikely. I just want to drive the point home. One last stat on Dan Moore. So I mentioned Will Levis, worst in the league at converting pressures to sacks, 30.4%. The quarterbacks that Dan Moore was blocking for last year: Russell Wilson, 8th worst pressure to sack ratio, 23.1%. Justin Fields, 20th worst. And this is not out of 32 quarterbacks. I had to drop the minimum qualifier down pretty low to get Fields to even show up because he didn't play that many games last year. So there's a lot of quarterbacks on this list. There's 44 quarterbacks, and Fields was the 20th worst in terms of pressure to sack, about middle of the pack. But Russell Wilson, 8th worst. So anyway, if Cam Ward can be better at turning pressures into sacks, which we think that's one of his greatest strengths as a prospect, then it could really drive down the sack numbers that this O-line allows. All right, we've covered 2 out of the 5 starters. We're going to cover the other 3, but first I want to remind everyone about Sinkers Beverages 40th birthday jamboree coming up Saturday, August 9th at 5:30 p.m. You can get tickets for just $10, comes with 2 free drinks. There'll be live music there all night, free giveaways, and all proceeds go to benefit the Martha K. O'Brien Center in East Nashville. So get your tickets in the video or podcast description. If you're just listening on audio, check that link in the description, get your tickets, and you got plans for Saturday, August 9th. Bring a date, just go have some fun, enjoy that Nashville atmosphere, some live music. Sounds like a great time. I wish I could make it, but I will be in Vegas on August 9th. All right. Let's keep going. Let's keep rolling along here. There's 3 other starters we need to talk about. Peter Skoronski, coming into his 3rd season now at left guard after being the 11th overall pick. I wouldn't say he has disappointed, but I also think that he may have been a little overdrafted considering what he's put on tape through 2 seasons. He has a chance to change that narrative, though, and I think if you look at how he finished last season, you should be extremely encouraged by what Peter Skoronski is turning into, blossoming into, developing into. Last year, overall, he was PFF's 12th high. He had finished the season last year with PFF's 12th highest pass blocking grade among all guards. 12th highest for the season. But if you take that sample size down and just look at weeks 10 through 18, so the last 9 weeks of the season, the second half of that season, Skoronski was the highest graded pass blocker among all guards with an 85.4 pass blocking grade across that stretch. He could be one of the best pass blocking guards in the NFL. If he continues that stretch of play for the duration of a season with a better left tackle next to him and Dan Moore, then there is a chance that Peter Skoronski helps elevate this offensive line again to above average status.
Look, anytime you take a guard at 11, there's always going to be a bit of leftover should they have done that sort of feelings and vibes. But he finished the year so strong last year. Like you said, I actually just wrote an article on it that's coming out early this week, I believe, on Titan Size. I think in those games, week 10 to 18, he allowed like 9 pressures total and 1 or 2 sacks. I think it was 2 sacks. And 7 of the 9 games, I'm remembering the article, 7 of the 9 games, I think he allowed 1 pressure or less. And that's with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph at quarterback, right? So guys who, again, hold onto the ball, pressure to sack rate, at least in Will Levis's case. Skoronski finished really strong. He's a good football player. To be honest with you, I don't even feel like I got to spend a ton of time talking about him. I think he's just kind of steady Eddie, and that's what I expect from him this season. I'll say this. Maybe you won't be if you're smart. You are going to be shocked if you're dumb at how much money Peter Skoronski is going to get someday, whether it's from the Titans or elsewhere. $80 million plus on a multi-year deal, 4 years, $80 million. That's like, look, what did Robert Hunt get in Carolina? 5 years, $100 million, I think it was, when it shocked everyone. Like, guards get paid nowadays. There aren't a lot of good ones. Peter Skoronski, even if you don't love him, is probably above league average at worst. And just like Dan Moore, they will pay league average. They will pay for offensive line play to upgrade it, right? Peter Skoronski is going to get a ton of money someday.
Yeah, Will Fries last year signed a 5-year, $88 million, or this offseason,
and he's coming off a season-ending
million.
Serious injury, by the way, when he signed that deal.
Yeah, that's what you're expecting. So I'm fully with you. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on Skoronski. I would say my expectations for him are pretty high, and I'll be disappointed if he doesn't play well. But he's one of the guys, like you said at the top, that I'm just not that worried about. No. And then there's Kevin Zeitler, who they obviously signed in free agency this offseason to a 1-year deal. He's 35. He just turned 35 back in March, so he'll be 35 this whole season, getting up there in age. But this is a guy who has been to the Pro Bowl once. He's been to the Pro Bowl in 2023. And last year, you mentioned Seth Walder and ESPN's pass block win rate metric. Last year, Zeitler was 6th overall amongst interior offensive linemen in that metric as well, according to Seth Walder's article that he put out, I think, on Thursday or Friday last week. So this is another guy who's set to be a massive upgrade over what they had before, even if he's not the best guard in the league. Seth Walder noted that he thinks he's better than guys like Will Fries, who went and signed massive deals, even at his age, that, playing at age 35. Like, he's a guy that not only comes in with a track record of success and a good season under his belt last year, but also veteran experience that is frankly not very present elsewhere on this line. Even Lloyd Cushenberry, is 27, I believe, this year. The other rest of the guys were just recently drafted, or Dan Moore, who I mentioned, is 26, going to be 27 in September. Like, this isn't a unit that has a lot of experience outside of Kevin Zeitler. And I think that's something that was missing from last year, is somebody that can show these guys what it's like to be a professional on this line and how the unit can gel together, because he's seen it come together. He has undergone that process, and I think he can be a massive help in the meeting rooms, in addition to the high-level play he should give them on the field.
Maybe we should have seen it come in how young they were last year, right? Rookie left tackle, second-year guard, free agent center, fourth-year right guard, and third-year right tackle, who NPF, who missed most of his second year, right? So they were so young up front last year. Kevin Zeitler will come in, be a huge benefit. I took this from Pro Football Focus. 13-year career. He's had 1 year with a PFF grade lower than 71.6. Definition of consistency. Last year, people forget, last year was his only year in Detroit. People treat him like he was in Detroit forever for some reason. So he goes, and it is one of the positives, he goes to Detroit last year, it's a new environment for him, same as Tennessee this year. He was phenomenal. He ranked 4th out of 73 qualifying guards. His PFF grade last year was 86.5, his highest since 2014. That's elite. Hopefully it speaks to his ability to, again, acclimate new teammates, new surroundings, new offense, but it also indicates he's not falling off with old age, right? Like, they're saying last year was his best year. Now, if you want to see the both sides of it, you want to be a negative Nancy, you want some of the caveats, playing next to Frank Ragnow last year, a best center in the NFL, Penei Sewell, like Jahmyr Gibbs, like phenomenal offense, best offense in the NFL, overseen by Ben Johnson. Like, yeah, that makes a huge difference, but you'd love to think that the fact that he played at such a high level at his age, that there's not going to be some drastic fall off this year in Tennessee.
Yeah, I agree. Ravens were the best offense in the NFL by multiple metrics last year, but that's okay. We'll let
Lions
that one
for the
slide.
most points per game, didn't they?
I don't know about points per
I
game,
think
but
the Lions
total
give
yards,
more points
yards per
per game.
play. Okay. All right.
Let us
We'll
know
give
in
you
the
that.
comments who's right. Was it Justin or Justin? Who was the best offense in the NFL last season?
I love it. And while you're at it, hit subscribe to the channel, like the video, and yeah, drop some thoughts in the comments below. Appreciate you guys. We're going to move on to JC Latham here. JC Latham, I think, has the potential to be the best player on this Titans O-line, highest draft pedigree, the transformation he's undergone this offseason where, he really took it seriously when they had a meeting with him at the end of the year and they said, here's a review of your first season. Here's what we need from you going forward to reach your ceiling in the next season. And they said, we need you to get in. One of the things they said was, we need you to get in better shape because, he talked about this on his Bussin' with the Boys appearance a month or so ago, where he talked about, I've been at this weight and coaches have told me to lose weight in college. And then I went and dominated for a whole season. And I realized I'm right. I don't really need to lose this weight. They want me to be in better shape, but I don't need to be in better shape. I'm strong enough. I'm in good enough shape. And then last year he had a similar mindset where they told him at the beginning of the year, like, hey, we may need you to lose some pounds here. We may need you to be in a little better shape. And he was like, I've heard that before, went out. And then, 3/4 of the way through the year, hits a rookie wall and realizes, holy shit, I do need to be in better shape. Like, they were not wrong. Like, it's finally catching up to me. And I can't remember a situation where a player on the team that I've rooted for has taken that to heart so seriously and really went and just transformed his body into, like, he looks like the prototypical all-pro tackle body format, like body type now, with the big broad shoulders and the waist that doesn't expand. It's like, how does a person even carry that much weight and look as good as he does? It's unbelievable. So I'm expecting massive things from JC Latham, and I teased it at the top. Does he have all pro potential? I think if there's anybody on this offensive line that has it, it's him. And I don't know that he's going to be an all pro in year 2. Some of this is like a PR thing where there are just established names that are going to get all pro votes because of the careers that they've put together. So I think that's the biggest barrier, honestly, to JC Latham, is having a good enough year on a team that isn't going to get a lot of attention. They don't have any primetime games. They're a small market team that they don't even talk about the number 1 overall pick when he goes to this team. So is JC Latham going to get enough press coverage to be an all-pro player, like actually get that nod? Probably not. But if he can play at an all-pro level, now granted, that would mean taking a pretty big step forward from where he was last year. But just with the hard work and dedication that he has and his ability to transform his body this offseason, and now another year again under Bill Callahan, moving back to his more natural position at the right side of the line. And yes, he played left tackle in high school, so it shouldn't have been that big of a switch. Well, he played a lot better level of competition at right tackle in college than the left tackle he played in high school. So I think that's going to help him as well. And I'm just really excited to see what kind of player JC Latham can develop into, because I think the sky's the limit. And I am kind of expecting, maybe not all pro, because that's asking a lot of a second-year guy making a position switch in the NFL, but I'm expecting really good high-level play from JC Latham this year. I think he will be their best O-lineman.
I'm in full agreement. It's funny. I was going to start this by saying sky's the limit, and you said it to close, so I changed it, but I said it anyway. I think JC Latham's going to have a phenomenal season. I was incredibly encouraged by what he put on tape last year. I'll be honest with you. I thought JC Latham had a damn good season, all things considered. What do you mean by all things considered, Justin? I think it's really hard to play offensive tackle in the NFL as a rookie. It's really hard. I mean, I talk to these guys all the time, and I had one guy tell me, you're just trying to stay afloat. I'm trying to keep my head above water. These guys are so good, these D linemen. I'm just learning. JC Latham had a handful of stinkers. Maybe you can lose a finger or two and say he had a handful. He had 3 or 4 stinkers probably all year long. I thought he was really good. Now you add the fact that he's moving over to the right side where he's more comfortable. He's got a great right guard playing next to him, a veteran guy in Kevin Zeitler. Then you add the accountability and the body transformation. Like, yeah, sky's the limit for JC Latham. I'm so high on him. The all-pro stuff, I don't get too much into that. Like you said, PR, names, all that. I think JC Latham's going to be a phenomenal player for the Tennessee Titans, a long-term solution at right tackle. That's really all that matters.
Yeah, I agree. I'm super excited to see what he does at training camp and just how he takes this, this challenge to be better and be their best lineman. That's the challenge in front of him. How's he going to grasp that into this season? I think he will meet it head on. Okay, we have a handful of players we haven't talked about yet. Let's just quickly go through who we think the backups are here. So Blake Hance, I think there's no doubt in my mind at this point, he's your backup swing tackle. You look at his career snaps distribution. In his career, he's played 272 snaps at left tackle, 473 snaps at right tackle. So over 700 total snaps at tackle. 95 at left guard, 76 at right guard. So a little over 160 total snaps at guard compared to over 700 at tackle. Could he step up and play guard in a pinch? Sure. But I think this is your swing tackle. It's a very important position in the NFL. Guys get hurt, even if they only miss a game or so. Having a bad swing tackle can wreck that game for you. And if it's a multi-game stretch, like you need somebody competent that can just hold down the fort. And Blake Hance is going to be that guy for them this year.
I'll take it a step further than you. I think Blake Hance plays both tackle and guard for them and is first guy off the bench at either position if there's an injury. I tend to think they look at Corey Levin as almost like a center-only player. He played some guard and he can do it, but I think they like him better at center, especially with what Lloyd's going through. We'll get to that in a second. I think Jackson Slater, they'd probably like to give as much of a redshirt year as they can, being a small school day threer, I should say. I think Blake Hance play. I want to say at OTAs in camp, he was playing mostly guard, which kind of surprised me. That's something we should monitor closely because we're nerds and we care about stuff like this at training camp. Like, where is he working predominantly, and is he working at all four or both, depending on how you look at tackle and guard? I think he's going to play both for them, and I think there's a good chance he's first guy off the bench if there's an injury at any position that's not center. He was with Bill Callahan in Cleveland. Callahan knows him well. He has started games for the Browns at tackle. He's played quite a bit of guard, as you said. I think they like him. Maybe people think we're crazy for having him as a roster lock. I think he's a lock, and I think he's first guy off the bench.
And he's a guy they went out and signed in free agency.
Like early. That wasn't a July move.
Right. They signed multiple guys on the offensive line in free agency. Obviously, Zeitler and Dan Moore were the big ones. But Blake Hance was back in that second wave. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily day one, but it wasn't like, let's let everything play out and let's evaluate our roster as our first OTAs and then see where we need to add. No, Hance was more of a priority signing than anyone on the O-line aside from Dan Moore and Zeitler. So that was a big deal, I think, and that kind of signals what they think of him internally. Corey Levin, we've talked about it. He's going to be the backup center. There's 40% chance he starts week one, depending on where Cushenberry is at in his recovery. He's the guy that's going to replace Cushenberry if he has to sit for or miss any time during this rehab process. And I guess he gives you probably below average level play, but it's
close.
Yeah, it's close to average. He's not NPF. It's survivable. He's not Dennis
Daly. Yeah.
It's survivable level play, I think, is what we expect from Corey Levin. So like I'm fine. I'm fine with it if he has to get. I'm not excited about it. It's just a little bit of a concern, but where your weak point is if he has to come in, and it's not as weak as it could be in some other circumstances.
Fully agree.
And then the last guy that we have as a roster lock is Jackson Slater, and this is the wild card to your prediction that Blake Hance is first guy off the bench at guard and tackle. Is how quickly does Jackson Slater get up to speed? How much do they trust him early? Or like you said, do they want to redshirt him essentially for his rookie season? Because if he makes a lot of progress, he could challenge for that first guard off the bench role.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he got a lot of work there during OTAs and minicamp while they were kind of giving Kevin Zeitler rest days. But they were also cross-training him at center, I was told. He got some reps at center during that too, because it's typical. You're a day three rookie. You're not starting. Well, I need you to play multiple positions. That's kind of been the approach with Jackson Slater this offseason. I think you'll continue seeing that at training camp. He'll be playing guard and center. Remember, I made the prediction very early on that he's actually a better center than he is guard, even though he played guard most of the time in college. I went as far as to say he might be their future starter at center if Lloyd Cushenberry doesn't bounce back and is a cut candidate next offseason. So something to watch with Slater at camp. I think he plays guard and center, but I think they probably try to protect him from actually getting onto the field too early.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. So let's go through the remaining 8 players here who are competing for, we think, 1 spot, maybe 2 in a world where they keep 10, maybe 2. And you want to just rapid fire tell me one fact about each guy so we know who we're working with here? So Sam Mustipher, first on my list.
Yeah, veteran center. They signed in one of the later waves in free agency. 2019 undrafted free agent, played college ball at Notre Dame. I recognized the name immediately. I think the goal, well, first of all, they could have needed, I didn't even think of this until now, they could have needed another offseason center, to be honest, while Cushion isn't really doing anything. I think the goal was probably to have him come in, maybe push Corey Levin for that role, compete with him for a roster spot. Indications are Corey Levin is pretty darn secure in that number 2 center spot. I ultimately don't think Sam Mustipher is going to push him and win that job.
Chandler Brewer.
Yeah, veteran guy as well. 2019 UDFA local product, Middle Tennessee State University. Had a lot of great ones from there. Kevin Byard, right? Came out of, they had a D-end. What was it? They had a D-end too. I can't remember. That's going to drive me nuts. They had a D-end out of Middle Tennessee State. Big guy. Was there several years ago. Was a veteran. It's going to drive me nuts. Anyway, drop the comment. If you remember, drop the comment below. Chandler Brewer was with Nick Holtz in Jacksonville in 2023. Not for a whole lot of time, but Nick Holtz will know him. He actually joined the Titans in November. During the season is when he signed to them on the practice squad. He's a holdover on the 90-man roster. Will try to compete for one of those back-end spots inside, facing a lot of competition with a Jackson Slater, Corey Levin, Blake Hance. He's a long shot.
Brendan James.
I remember I interviewed Brendan James when he came out. I remember that. Nebraska 2021 5th-round pick. I think he spent most of his time with the Chargers. They signed him the same day they signed Sam Mustipher, I want to say. He's got a little utility in him, but he's mostly an interior guy, mostly a guard. Again, going to try to push those interior guys. He's been in the NFL for a couple of years now. I guess his rookie contract just expired, essentially, entering his 5th year now. Again, I remember when he came out. I interviewed him, day 3 guy, trying to push those guys. He'll get a lot of run in the preseason.
Andrew Rupsich.
They've liked him enough to keep him around, right? He's been around for quite a while. Remember, he got into like the right guard competition last year after the whatever his name friggin' retired unexpectedly. So Sadiq Charles. So Andrew Rupsich got into that competition. They've liked him enough to keep him around. I'll say this: I think the competition this year is probably harder than it's ever been for him. Again, having a Blake Hance, having a Jackson Slater. I don't like his chances this year, but maybe he's maybe he's the Mason Kinsey of this offensive line room. He's been on the practice squad for a couple years. I think he's better than Sam Mustipher, Chandler Brewer, and Brendan James. So he'll be in that mix maybe if they keep 10.
All right, we got 4 more names. That's how many guys are in this room. It's so many. Okay, next up, we're going to move to tackles now.
You're not doing any of the work, and he's huffing. No, I'm kidding.
Those were mostly interior guys. Rupsich, like you mentioned, was sort of an interior guy last year, although he might be able to play both. The next 4 guys we're going to talk about are tackles. So Jalen Duncan first up.
I'm so done with this experience. I think everyone, I think you are too. I think the Titans probably are. They were really intrigued by him. He's got the size. Like they tried to give him so many reps at right tackle. Anytime they wanted to bench NPF or one of the other shitty right tackles they had, they put this guy in the game. He got hurt after 3 snaps and had to leave. Like I'm done with, and he hasn't looked good when he has been able to stay on the field. I'm so done with this experience. I hope they are too. I just don't see the path anymore.
Next up, Oli Udoh.
Yeah, I remember him coming out. There was draft Twitter. We always fall in love. We drink. We always fall in love with small.
I'm going to start dinging every time you say one of your sayings.
I don't remember if I interviewed him now. I feel like I did. You know what? I'll check my hard drive and tell you on the next episode because I've got all my interviews backed up. Coming out of Elon, I think it's Elon. I don't know how it's pronounced, man. Elon
Musk.
Yeah, Elon Musk University. 2019 6th rounder. Draft Twitter fell in love. This is a small schooler you got to know. What do we always say about the draft, Graver? It's usually actually a pessimistic thing. He has not panned out at all. He has stuck around, but he's a journeyman. They don't have a lot in this tackle room, but I still think they've probably got a little better.
All right. We got 2 left now. Brandon Crenshaw Dixon.
Gave him a lot of money in undrafted free agency. He's their only UDFA lineman, period. So, I mean, they knew they had a need at this spot. I did think he was borderline draftable. Coming out of Florida, big program, SEC, I think he was their highest paid UDFA, if I'm remembering correctly. That gives him a great chance to compete. Didn't hear a lot of positives coming out of OTAs or minicamp. In fact, a couple of times I heard Femi Oladejo just beat Brandon Crenshaw Dixon around the edge badly for a pressure. Draymond Jones just pushed Brandon Crenshaw Dixon. I mean, we'll see at camp, bigger sample size, preseason, all that. They were intrigued enough to give him a big payday.
He also had that false start that we
Yeah.
mentioned. That he got like taken off the field immediately.
Yes, hard to do that, and he did it though.
Yeah. All right. The last guy, I saved this guy for last for a reason.
He did it on purpose.
John Ojukwu.
Yeah, I think my 9th guy on the roster right now. I mean, he's not a lock, so I wouldn't include him in the top 8. Stoney, Easton Freeze, Zach Lyons, having a lot of conversations with our pals. They've convinced us, or almost convinced. I'm not fully there yet. I like to kind of stick to my guns, but they've almost fully convinced us that if they don't keep a blocking tight end on the roster, right? Like Josh, there's all this chatter about Josh Wiley's not going to make this team. It's going to be David Martin Robinson. We countered with, well, David Martin Robinson can't block. That means they don't have an expert blocking tight end. The good counterpoint that our friends have, and I will say it is a good counterpoint, they used John Njoku a lot last year in jumbo packages. They often put him on the field instead of Josh Wiley. And then you get to the point where Brian Callahan, a lot 11 personnel, pass-happy coach, the blocking tight end isn't as important when it's not a Mike Vrabel offense, right? So if they don't keep an expert, they like John Njoku to do that for them. He did it a little for them last year. I can see that vision. I can. And we've got him on the roster as the 9th. I would say right now it's a toss-up between him and Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon just because of the UDFA money and the upside. I don't think John Njoku is a very good tackle. Anytime he's had to play, or even in the preseason, you haven't really seen the upside there. But this might be a very specialized role where he's like a flex blocker, right? Like he's a flex blocking tight end. And they don't even think he could really play tackle in a traditional sense. But they do have to keep another tackle on this roster. We talked about Blake Hance being that guy. We'll find out for sure how they see him, whether it's at tackle, whether it's at guard, whether it's at both. In my opinion, you need a second backup on the roster because Corey Levin and Jackson Slater definitely can't play it. We know that for sure. So they will have another reserve tackle. It could be John Njoku because of that specialized role. It could be Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon, or it could be a waiver claim. Remember, they're number 1 on the priority. Will they find a guy? Look, teams don't cut good offensive linemen. The caveat there is the situation here is kind of bad enough that maybe there will be a bad one that's better than what they have, right? Like if Dan Moore or JC Latham gets hurt, they're in trouble in this room. Yeah. They're in big time trouble. But they got to keep a 9th. They got to keep a second backup tackle. Right now, I think Njoku is the favorite because how he kind of played that quasi-blocking tight end role occasionally last year.
And then I think if that is the case, then Crenshaw-Dixon would be a priority guy to get back on the practice squad as like a developmental. Yeah. There's a reason they gave him that money. I don't think they gave him all that money because they see him being on the roster this year. I think they did it because they want to stash him on the practice squad and try to develop him basically into a swing tackle. Like that would be a great career for someone who went undrafted if he can develop into that 6th lineman kind of role.
I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of evidence out there, and I'm guilty of it myself. We tend to use guaranteed money as this helps your chances of making the roster. No one does the actual research. I did read an article about it recently. If you go and look at like all the guaranteed money last year, it's not really predictive at all of who actually ends up making it. It's always like Julius Chestnut out of Sacred Heart, who got very little guaranteed money but had a phenomenal preseason, right? It's always the guys you don't see coming. There's not a lot there between guaranteed money and actually making the 53.
But I bet there's probably a bigger correlation between that and the practice squad.
Oh, yeah.
But then,
yeah, probably. Yes.
To that last thing you said there, I do think that, we've had some comments recently asking us to do a full episode on like potential waiver claims the Titans might be able to make. And we'll touch on that a bit throughout the preseason. I will say like it's almost impossible.
It's hard.
To even,
it's really
like we don't
hard.
know who's going to get cut, and we don't know how the Titans are going to value them in their scheme versus where they're like. That's a really, really extensive thing to try to research. No one said
Baker Jr. last year, right? I don't think
exactly.
No one said Ali Gay. Those are the guys they claimed. I think it was just the two of them.
But I will say that if they are going to make a waiver claim, which waiver claims are more rare than you think, like the Titans will probably make one or two.
8 of them in the entire league every year.
But if they were to make one, I think this is the most likely position group just because the tackle depth behind Blake Hance is question mark after question mark after guys that we know cannot hack it at this level, like Duncan. I mean, Njoku has the potential role here, but as a tackle, it was just a disaster last year. would you trust Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon in the lineup as a UDFA rookie tackle? Like, I'm not doing that. Rupsich, more of an interior guy who could maybe bounce outside, but that is another disaster waiting to happen.
Nowadays. I think he's strictly playing guard.
So though, like, basically everyone on the roster behind Blake Hance is a disaster waiting to happen. So is the 11th best guy on the Lions or the Eagles roster at O-line, like, it's the 11th best guy who doesn't make the team. Could he come in and be the 9th or 10th best in Tennessee? Probably, because the depth here is really concerning. And I think, we opened this episode talking about reasons to be concerned about this line and reasons that we have optimism. And like, the starting 5 is the reason for optimism. Yes. The injury to Cushenberry is the reason for concern, and part of that is because of the depth. And if Corey Levin's already pushed into a starting role because Cushenberry can't play, and then somebody else gets hurt, and Blake Hance has to pop in at guard, and then a tackle gets hurt, like, injuries, obviously this goes without saying. I think any season can be derailed by injuries, but when we talk about the safety position or the defensive tackle rotation, like, there's guys in those rooms that we feel okay about the depth. In this group, the depth drops off really fast, and that could be like the worst thing that could happen to the Titans this season is one of these key guys gets hurt.
It does, absolutely. I don't think this depth is in a good place. I'll end on a positive note. I agree with you. It's worse than most cases, but I would wager there are probably, probably 30 teams in the NFL that are dissatisfied with their offensive line depth. Like, no one is thrilled about their ninth line. Nobody. Like, they don't exist. Ninth offensive linemen don't exist in these rooms. They just don't. The Eagles have the best O-line in the room. I doubt they love their 9th guy.
Maybe the Eagles. They'd be the only ones. All right. That's it. That's our roster projection. Those 9 guys that we talked about, and everyone else gets cut. Maybe Crenshaw-Dixon is a practice squad target. Maybe Jalen Duncan or Andrew Rupsich or one of these guys that have been around for a while, hanging out on the practice squad will be practice squad targets. But I don't know, if more veteran level guys like Mustafa, Brendan James, and Oli Udoh, like, do they look at those guys as practice squad guys? Maybe a stash, because if in case someone gets hurt, they can get elevated to the 53. But I think you're looking more at like developmental pieces for the practice squad. And that's it. The O-line preview, Justin. 16 motherfucking players we just talked through. Like, holy shit, guys. That was a lot. So that's it. We did offensive line. Tomorrow, we'll be back with the defensive end, aka edge rusher preview, talking through one of the more concerning groups on the Titans, but a group that also has some upside, maybe some untapped potential that we can get into on tomorrow's pod. So come back for that. Again, thanks to Sinkers Beverages. Check out the link to the Sinkers 40th birthday jamboree in the description here. Subscribe to the channel. If you're not subscribed, we hate you. It's that simple. Do you want us to hate you? No. So subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and drop your thoughts in a comment below. Which team had a better offense last year, the Ravens or the Lions? And we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.